Well, I'll have to admit that there are times where I have been accused of acting like a big kid. I should have worn them today. My favorite shoes are my Star Wars shoes. I don't know if you've ever seen them before, but they go really well with a pastor collar. But I think it's important that we take a moment and look at the perspective of children. Jesus says that it's important to act like a child. You know, the disciples say, "Who will be the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" And Jesus looked at them and said, "You need to think more like a child, because a child would never ask that question, right? A child's never come to you and said, 'Dad, who do you love most?'" Well, sometimes it happens, I guess. But I think if we can learn to see the world through the eyes of a child, it can help us all live better lives. It can all help, because children have some unique gifts that are so different than adults. Once we become adults, we lose some of these gifts. And I want to take 3 today and point those out to you. Children grow nonstop. Children change nonstop. It has been a lot of fun to watch Caroline grow over the last 9.5 months, to see her grow and to witness her as she starts to do new things for the first time. I remember we were over Rick and Deborah Perry's a couple months ago when she first started crawling, and it was such an awesome moment to be there and to share this, her first crawls, and now she's standing up on her own for a short period of time, and she wobbles a little, and then but she's actually standing up on her own. Just watch her grow and to watch her change right in front of our eyes. And it's been great over the course of almost 6 years at this church to watch the children of Abiding Grace grow. I remember how small Elizabeth Anderson was when we first started. And the first time she held her hand out for communion, and I went to give her a blessing, and she said, "Ugh!" It was great. Do you remember that, Margaret? Ever since then, I have to give her bread. But if we're honest, adults are hesitant to change, hesitant to grow, because growth means change. We are creatures of habit. And churches, more than any place really, is a place that's really difficult to change. I mean, after all, we have the opinion here, if we've done it twice, it's a tradition, and so we have to keep doing it. I've been traveling around different churches over the past couple months, getting to know pastors and what their context is like in their churches, and I've found that some of the most difficult things that churches struggle with is change. Even when they know they have to change. Even when they know they have to change, it's still hard. But our lives would be so much richer, so much deeper, if we were willing to grow. If we were willing to go out and say, "I am going to grow. I am going to change." If we were going to learn to do new things, learn to try new things. I remember when I graduated from college, my father and I took a motorcycle class, and we got our motorcycles license. And it was just so thrilling to learn something new and to get a license. And we went out and both bought motorcycles. We both had Harley Davidsons. And then I immediately moved to a different state. I still think about the fun we would have had, though, if I didn't move. I just want to encourage you to think about changing. Think about growing a little bit, and maybe just start small. Maybe just start small, like where you sit on Sunday morning. That's big? Well, so next Sunday, my challenge for you is to sit in a different section than you're sitting in today. Some of you are like, not going to happen. But more so, I just encourage you not to be afraid of change, because children change all the time, and they do it so well. And you, at some point in your life, were a child, and you changed. And just think about ways that you can change for the better. Children also have fun. Children explore. I remember when I got my first bicycle, it was like freedom to explore the neighborhood. And my friends and I, we would go around the neighborhood on our bicycles, and there were streets that we'd go down for the first time and be like, "Whoa, I have never been here before." And it was just so much fun to explore. But we get so set in our ways as adults that we don't try new things. We don't explore anymore. We don't go on adventures. And our bucket list gets kind of set to the side. We'll revisit that later, maybe, right? As you all know, Curtis Piper, one of our members, last May was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And last July, Curtis came up here and shared some of his story, some of the things he wanted to do. Not sure if he'd have the time to do them. And so Curtis, pancreatic cancer is a very difficult disease, and most people don't have much time after they're diagnosed. And Curtis didn't think he had much time. And so he let his passport expire, not thinking that he was going to have time to use it or that he would feel well enough to use it. And his passport, I think, expired in October. And I was meeting with him in November. And he said, I just didn't think I needed to renew it. And then December came around, and he still was feeling okay. And January came around, and he said, well, now I feel like if I do renew it, by the time I get it back, I won't feel well. And finally, in February, I think it was, he said, yeah, I did it. I just went, and we got it expedited, and I'm going to get my passport, and we're going to go on a trip. And last Easter, as we were celebrating the resurrection here, Curtis and Heidi were skiing in Colorado Springs. And as of 8 minutes from now, Curtis and Heidi are getting on a plane and flying to Italy for 10 days. Because he's going to explore. He's not going to sit around and wait for the disease to take him. He's not going to sit around and wait for his life to end. He has his bucket list, and he has things he wants to do, and he's going to do them. He's going to explore. He's going to go on an adventure. 4 days here and 3 days there, and he's going to try different foods. And if he doesn't feel well one day, oh well. Might as well not feel well in Italy instead of not feeling well in Colleyville. And God bless him. But there's also a God piece to this. And Pat and Cecil, I didn't tell you guys I was going to share this story, but forgive me. A couple years ago, I came into my office, and there was a bag there with a picture in it. And the picture was this beautiful sun setting over the Pacific Ocean. And I said, well, this is beautiful. Where'd you get it? And they took it. And I said, well, tell me the story. And they were driving in California, right? And they just pulled aside to see and they saw it, and it just made them think, of a God moment. It had to be a God moment, right? And then they said, we just have to take a picture of this and give it to Pastor Nick. Because when you explore, you see God. You see God all around you. When you act kind of like a child and allow yourself to live. Allow yourself to see what is in this world, the beauty of it. Starting Abiding Grace was an adventure. And for some of you who are joining Abiding Grace, I hope you realize you are joining an adventure, because we are going to continue to adventure together. God has a lot more adventures for us together. And this isn't a place where we just come and we just wait for something to happen. We go out into the community and we make it happen. That's the great day of service. And finally, I think children don't overcomplicate the truth. They just trust. I remember when I was young, we always made a big deal about Easter. My mother would take us to the store, and we'd all get new clothes, and we'd all get together with my grandmother. It would just be a wonderful, huge family day. And my grandmother, I remember when I was little, she told me, she said, the sun always shines on Easter. It never rains on Easter. And as a young person, I just believed her because I trusted her. And to this day, I realize now that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But to this day, if it ever rains on Easter, I'm like, but it always is sunny on Easter. Didn't somebody tell Pete Delkus that it's supposed to be sunny? I want you to know God. I want you to understand God. I want you to have this thirst for knowledge and for faith. But in our attempt to understand God, we often overcomplicate things. And we don't have the innocence of children when we study God. And so we bring our biases and our agendas, and And that causes us to disagree with others as we try and understand who God is. And when we disagree with others, sometimes churches split. It started with the Reformation in 1517, and it's been happening over and over again until now. I've sit on the Synod Council, and we are having churches who are splitting right now. And it's a sad thing. But I think if we look at faith like a child, if we keep it simple enough, I think we can all agree on one thing: the Easter story. That's what brings us all here. The Easter story. Jesus died on a cross for your sins. Jesus rose from the grave and was victorious over sin, death, and the devil. And Jesus will come again. The Easter story is a simple truth that we can all understand, no matter how young you are, no matter how old you are. It's simple, but the Easter story has changed the world, and it changes the hearts of those who trust in God. And so may we all grow in faith. May we all explore our awesome God, and may we all learn to trust in God's overwhelming love. Amen.